All right, welcome back, everyone. So we've got a player and a goal, and now we could actually build some levels here and create a interesting game. And the challenges could be, making some awkward jumping things, creating some holes and gaps to be able to find and navigate your way through this maze. But often in a platformer game like this, we want to add some layers of challenge to make our game even better. And that could involve, this tricky platforms that we were laying out, but we could throw some extra obstacles in here to make it even more difficult. And I was thinking some enemies here, and very, very common um, meme in games is to have some kind of enemies kind of patrolling back and forth. So it adds a little bit of a difficulty trying to get to the platform because you've got to time it right there. So let's look at adding some enemies to our game. And I have already brought in from Kenny. I grabbed some a zombie walking sprite here, so you can go figure out what you want your enemy to be like. And I've just used the same package I used for my player, but they had a zombie option. I've just grabbed the zombie walk. And because I'm going to add multiple versions of this zombie in, I'm going to make a brand new scene for this. And the zombie is going to function a lot like the player, except instead of us controlling it, the script is going to control it in totality. So I am going to add some similar things here. So the zombie is going to be a character body 2D, and I'm just going to call that guy enemy. It's going to need the same things the player needs. So I need a sprite. Oh, I've got a walking sprite here, so I'm going to make it an uh, animated sprite 2D. And well, let's bring that enemy in there so I know how to big to make my collision box. I need to add an animation, add some new sprite frames like I did for the player. Click on those sprite frames, up it comes below. I don't need to have multiple animations at the moment. It's just going to be a walking one, so I'm going to leave it default and bring one and two of these over here. And I don't think we did this with the player, but because the player can have multiple different frames, but the zombie's basically going to just walk all the time, and we don't need him to start walking when we press a key. It's just going to walk. So there is a little button right here, which is autoplay on load. So that means that's going to start the default animation just going right away as soon as this player starts. So that's kind of handy to have that. We don't have to have any coding there. And now we need to add a collision shape that we've got the enemy in there. And let's make that a rectangle and zoom in, make this guy a little bit bigger there to fill up the full size of my enemy. Perfect. And get them all there. Perfect. And I'm just going to save this scene. So we've got a enemy scene ready to go. Actually, let's add a script because I know I'm going to need a script later on before I put the enemy in there. But oops, not a node. Let's attach a script, and we'll just make the enemy script there. Then I'm going to come back a little bit later and put some programming in. But let's figure out now that I've got a little enemy scene created. I can link that. I'm going to put it on level 1 because I'm going to put a couple enemies here to patrol. I'm going to instantiate or link a new enemy scene in here. Perfect, and they should appear probably in the corner of the origin of the level there. And I don't know, let's put one right here, and I could link another one, or because it's a scene, I can duplicate that scene as well. Just gives me a copy of that exact same scene, and maybe I'll put one up here. Just make it a little more challenging to get to that sprite, or to the goal, I should say. So if we play our level now, we should have some enemies on that platform walking away, or at least appearing that they walk away. And yeah, there they are there. Now, at the moment, they don't do anything, and you can see they are a character body, so they are a physics body, so I can walk on top of them and jump around, and they kind of act like a wall. So they're not really doing much for me at the moment, but there they are. Now we need to get them moving. So let's go back into my enemy scene and play with that script a little bit. And this is going to be a little bit easier to go. I'm going to make, like I did with the player, I'm going to make a var move speed. And I don't know, let's try 100 to start with. And so we've got this working here. All I need to do is say velocity equals move speed, because we know we have a built-in velocity variable on character bodies that worked with the player. It's going to work fine with that. And then we need a move and slide to set it up. So very, very similar to the player, but a little more simple because we don't have to have any if statements. We don't have to have this controlled by keyboards. We're just going to start moving as we go along. So let's try my level 1 there and see how that looks. Oh, and oh, there we go. So velocity, notice we get an error. This is great. Error setting velocity with value of type int. So an int is an integer, meaning a number, and that's what I would expect here. But remember, velocity is talking about both the x and the y movement here. So I made a mistake. I forgot to say period x to make sure that we're only setting the x value. If I was to do the whole velocity, I need a vector 2, and I'd need to say the x and y value. But let's try that now. Perfect. I think I saw a guy moving there. Yeah, and he's no longer here. Oh, there's one over there. You can see he's stopped up there. Oh, there's the other one there. Perfect. So they have just moved along at a speed of 100, and they keep on going. Doesn't matter if they're on a platform or not, until they hit a wall. In this case, they hit the other platform there, and you can see that happened up above as well. So that's going to kind of ruin my illusion of this zombie patrolling the platform. I kind of want to keep them on the platform. And there's lots of different ways of doing this, but I've got one particular method I want to use because it allows me to keep the zombies on a platform, but it also allows me to just have the zombies walking in a particular area. So let's look at that. I'm going to create a brand new scene, and this scene is going to be just a static body, 2D, and I'm going to call it bumper. And the idea here is I would like a little wall that that I can put at the ends of the platform or wherever I want to contain the zombie on. If we look at my scene here, if I have some like little bumpers here and a bumper here, basically we can get the enemy to turn around, and that means I can put them wherever I want to contain the enemy. If I want to put them here, I can do that. Or if I wanted an enemy to say patrol from this area to this area, I could put bumpers in that the enemy can bounce back and forth. There are lots of different ways you can have like a Roomba, so you could be checking to see when you hit an edge and do something like fall detection uh, using something called a raycast. But in this case, I find this one a little more versatile. So I'm going to make this bumper. It is a static body, so it's going to function like a wall, just like the other platform did. It would normally I would put a sprite here to see this, but in this case, I don't actually want to see the bumper. I just want it to behave like a wall. So I don't need a graphic to go along with that, but I do need a collision shape to say where it's going to be. And I'm going to make it a rectangle, and I'm just going to make this, a little bit like the height of the enemy there. So I'm going to just save this scene as a bumper because might want to change things a little bit later if I need to. Perfect. So just as before, I'm going to instantiate, click on level 1. I'm going to link a copy of my bumper in and see if I made it about the right size. That looks pretty good. And so now what I can do is put a bumper. Actually, it's a little bit on the big side, so I'm going to go back and shrink that up a bit. There we go. That's a little bit better. And we can duplicate that with Control D. So now I have 2 bumpers, and I can basically put those bumpers on the ends of wherever I want to sandwich the enemy. Now, you're going to find yourself getting lots and lots of bumpers as you have numerous enemies as well. You may want to start to you see that your game tree here, this game, all of these nodes gets really kind of a little bit cumbersome, a little bit messy and such. So a great idea is to add a node here, and I'm just going to add a node 2D. This is my default node here, and I'm going to call this bumpers. Now, node 2D is really usually used as a container, and that's exactly what I'm going to do with it. So I'm going to drag the bumper onto the container, drag bumper 2 on there, and you could start to see we could get a whole bunch of bumpers under bumper, but with this little arrow beside that, we can kind of hide them and they don't take up a lot of room. We could do the same thing for enemies if we got more than 2 enemies going there, and you could have, whenever you have a large collection of things, kind of tuck them away in a folder so that you can keep them nice and organized. So now I can duplicate that for bumper 3, and there's another enemy up here, and I can duplicate that for bumper 4 and put that. And if you had 100 bumpers, then all I have to do is just hide them away. They're all nicely contained within that. You can even hide the bumpers and show the bumpers later on. Now, at the moment, let's see what we've got with this scene now that I've got some bumpers at the end here. All right, so we walk up. Perfect. They've stopped at the end. Now that's not exactly what I want to have happen, but at least I've contained him there. Oh, I've got another problem though, that I now have a wall that I run into, but we can take care of that in a little bit. Let's first of all get my enemy kind of doing its patrol. So I'm going to go onto my enemy here and back into the script. And so the reason it's hitting that wall and just stopping is I've said keep going to the right, and it keeps going to the right if you can. If it can, and when it can't, it hits the wall. So I want it to kind of, when it hits a wall, turn around. And fortunately, you may remember from the player, we have an if is on floor, which helped us for our jumping, but we also have an if is on wall. So if you hit the wall, we can kind of turn around, essentially, what I want to do. So right now my move speed is equal to 100, which means it's moving to the right, but I want to move to the left. So I could say move speed equals a negative 100, but then I'm going to keep going to the left and stop there. So essentially I want to turn around and change my direction. So what I could say is I want move speed to equal negative move speed. So if it's 100, it's going to be negative 100, and if it's negative 100, it's going to be negative 100, which is positive 100. Now the order of this is a little bit important because the move and slide, when it hits and stops, is going to set my velocity to 0 the next time it comes around. So I want to make sure that this if is on wall happens after my move and slide function. You can experiment around with this, but if you find yourself, your enemy just stops and doesn't move, it may be because it thinks it's supposed to be 0 and is going to make 0, -0, which is the same as 0. But if we make sure this if on the wall, it comes after our move and slide, you should be fine. So let's have a little look-see here. And we will play, and I'm hoping that my enemies now, hey, perfect. Have a look at that. So the enemies now hit the bumper and they turn and they move in the opposite direction, I should say. They don't turn at all. But we can fix that as well. We've also still got this issue now that I am hitting a wall with the bumper, and essentially I don't want that to happen. But let's fix the enemy first, and maybe in the next video we'll have a look at how we can make sure that the bumpers don't affect the player. So last little bit there, which I think we did on the player as well, is we can say, um, let's say if the move speed, got lots of ways of doing this as well. If the move speed is greater than 0, and so we can use some math, right? We've also got some equals to, but in this case, I want to know if I'm moving in the right direction, I want to be facing right, and if I'm moving in the left direction, I want to be facing left. And I just want to check that uh, because later on my move speed I may want to change. So, but always, if it's positive, it's moving right. If it's negative, it's moving left. So I'm going to use that same flip idea, that flip H, you may remember from the player. I'm going to say, so if I'm moving in the positive direction, then my animated sprite dot flip underscore H is equal to false. So I've turned it off, which is normally. Else, I must be going the other direction. So I'm going to say that the animated sprite is flip H is equal to true, so that I've flipped the graphic to face the other way. And if I play now, let's hope we get that in the right direction. Yes, perfect. So now our enemies kind of look like they're patrolling. They face the correct direction. You can start to see the real power of those if statements and the else statements to have two different things happening depending on some game logic that you want. We can have it true, any kind of math statement that can be true or false. We can use, in this case, I want to know if it's positive or greater than 0 or negative or less than 0. So great, now you've got some enemies. In our next video, let's look at seeing how we can make sure that those bumpers, because they're a wall, even though I can't see them, they're going to affect all character bodies or anything moving towards it. And I want to make sure it only applies to the enemies and not to me, which we can use for all sorts of other features as well. But let's do that in our next video.